We're going to look at time differences now for European ports. That's time differences between a standard and a secondary port. Of course, for Pacific, you just simply have a value that you subtract from the standard port, and that, or add, of course, and that gives you the secondary port value. With European ports, it's a little more complicated. So as an example, we're going to look at a standard port of Cobh, COBH, and the secondary port of Knightstown 725, and we want to look at what time we'll have high water and low water at Knightstown on the 26th of January with the two tides. So first of all, we would have gone to Cobh on the 26th of January and picked out the two tides that we were talking about. And here we've got 0812 and 1415, 0812 low water, 1415 high water. So we've written there 0812 and 1415. We're not really interested in the heights in this particular example. Now, if we go to Cobh in our book, our tide book at the back in the index, and we find Knightstown, and we can see with Cobh, along the top, you have for the high water values, so come down the high water column where it says time differences high water, come down to Cobh, and you can see in dark print 5, 11, 17, 23. And then for low water, coming down the same, 5, 11, 17, 23. How we look at these is we go from 5 o'clock, 0500 to 11, 11 till 17, 17 to 23, and of course 23 to 0500. So in effect it's a 24-hour clock. And we're looking at Knightstown, and if we look at the corrections for Knightstown, that would tell us that if our high water time that we had was 0500 exactly, we would take off 1 hour 18 minutes. If it was 1700, we'd do the same. If it was 1100, we'd take off 38 minutes, and if it was 2300, we'd take off 38 minutes. So these two are the values that you would apply if the times were exactly that situation. Well, in our example, our high water is at 1415. So if we look at the top here, we can see that it falls between 1100 and 1700. So we need to go that way with our correction, 11 to 17, and of course we're going from 0838 towards 0118 as well. So what I've done, I've written down those values here, 5, 11, 17, 23, and I've indicated we're going from 11 o'clock to 1700. And we've got a time difference of minus 38 minutes on this side and minus 1 hour 18. The first thing we do is get the difference between these two times, and we find that's 40 minutes. So what we're doing, we're finding a proportion of that to apply to the correction, then to apply to get our high water time for Knightstown. Our high water is 1415, falls between 11 and 17, and the time correction is 40 minutes, the difference. So how we apply the correction, 11 to 1415 is 3 hours 15 minutes, and 11 to 1700 is 6 hours. So 11 towards 1415 is 3 hours 15 minutes, 11 towards 17 is 6 hours. So we put 3 hours 15 divided by 6 hours multiplied by 40, which is the time correction difference. So what we're doing, we're finding a fraction of that amount, and when we put 3 hours 15 over 6 times 40 minutes, we find that we get 22 minutes. So our correction, we're going to have to apply that 22 minutes that way. It's very important that you apply this correction the same way as your time goes. So we went from 11 to 17, so we're applying the 22 minutes from minus 0.38 towards minus 1 hour 18. So we'd actually add it to that value there, because the minus value is getting greater. So we find 38 plus 22, of course, is 1 hour. So our high water, whilst at Cobh it's 14 hours 15, well, at Knightstown we subtract an hour from that and it's actually 13:15. So the high water time for Knightstown is going to be 13:15. Now we do a similar exercise for low water, and we find that our low water is 0812. And when we look at the values we've picked off for low water for Cobh, we find it falls between 5 and 11. So on this side we went from 11 to 17 for high water, another we went from right to left as well. On this side we're going between 5 and 11, and we're also going from left to right. and we get the difference in the two corrections, which is 40 minutes. It's just coincidental it's 40. They're not always the same values, it's just coincidental that. So we've gone from 500 to 812, which is our low water time, and 5 to 11. So we divide one by the other, so that's 3 hours 12 over 6 hours. And then we multiply that by the 40 minutes, which is the difference between our two differences. So that's 192 over 360. We've converted it to minutes to make it easier to do the maths. And we find we've got 21 minutes. So we've got to apply the 21 minutes. Now, in this instance, we're going from left to right. So we apply the difference from left to right. With this one, we applied it from right to left with high water because our time went from right to left. Now our time's going from left to right. We apply the correction that way. So it's 0056 towards 0136 for 21 minutes. So that's going to be 1 hour 17, minus 1 hour 17. So that tells us that whilst at Cobh, our low water was 0812, well at Knightstown it's going to be 1 hour 17 less than that. So at Knightstown it's going to actually be 0655. And that would be our low water time for Knightstown. So the important considerations: go to your main port, your standard port in dark print, and write down these values, the high water and low water values. Go to your secondary port and get the differences, and then you need to get the difference between those two differences and get a proportion of that to apply to one or other of these, depending on which way you go with your time. Once you've got that value, you then apply it to the high water and low water for Cobh, and that will give you the high water and low water for your second report.